Do you believe in skinwalkers? Listen to these 8 true skinwalker short stories and you decide. Let me know in the comments what you think. For lack of a better term, my maternal grandma has always been quite superstitious. She's not religious, but she does believe in a lot of paranormal things. Her father was Irish while her mother was full-blooded Navajo. In any case, she was from Nevada and had never traveled east of Montana. When I was in elementary school, my family and I went to visit her one year. The visit was mostly mundane and consisted of typical old people activities, but she always kept her curtains closed and would occasionally peek out the window. When people asked what she was doing, she would simply respond, "Yan'll do, she is watching me." This continued for almost the whole duration of our trip until a few days before our departure. My grandmother was planting flowers in the front yard that evening with my then young brother, who's now 19, when all of a sudden my grandmother starts shrieking, "Billy, get away from that beast! It's not safe!" Naturally, since we're in Nevada, we all imagined that my brother had discovered a scorpion or a rattlesnake. We all rush outside to see my grandma, hugging my younger brother and trembling against the side of the house. A massive black Great Dane-sized dog was standing in the yard and was giving my grandmother a stare that I had never seen before. I don't recall if it moved especially quickly or not, but I do recall that it had incredibly deep yellow eyes. It stared up at us, let out a tiny huff, and then bounded off. My grandma repeatedly said, "The Yan'll-do-she has found me," when my mother questioned her about what happened. Several weeks later, she relocated. A huge deer was spotted by the side of the road by my uncle and cousin. It hopped across the fence like a bipedal man as they drew closer. When my dad slowed down to offer an elderly Navajo woman walking by the side of the road a lift while returning from gallop, she sped off into the plains with unnatural speed. Once when I was a kid, my family and I were at my aunt's house, which is in the remote rural region, when we were being played with by a few entities. When we turned to face the source of the noises, they would imitate animal noises and flicker a flashlight on and off. In increasingly short sequences, the noises would come from all sides. Usually when I'm there on the reservation for a visit, alone in the middle of the night, I'll sense the presence of evil. Dread, terror, and paranoia will rush over me, and then they'll vanish in an instant. My uncle is Native American and Mexican. Southern California's Mojave Desert is where this occurred. He and his girlfriend were out late one night, driving around when they spotted what appeared to be a large black dog by the side of the road. The dog started across the road as he slowed down. This animal moved more like a toy rocking horse than a typical dog would. It allegedly stopped in the middle of the road, stared directly at them, and had glowing red eyes. It terrified my uncle, who's the toughest person I know. This occurred roughly 12 years ago. The center of an Indian reservation is where my family's farm is located. I once took care of the farm while my folks were away shopping for Christmas when I was home for the holiday. Very late at night, I was alone at home when I heard all of our cows panicking. I was certain that the area's rabid wild dogs were to blame. As a result, I put on my boots, grabbed my shotgun, loaded it, and went out into the field. It was gloomy, but there was a full moon, and it was just peeking through the clouds at the exact time to light up all the snow. This was the ideal setting for a horror film. Just as I was about to run out into the middle of the field, I noticed 2 dogs standing up and fighting with each other. I consider this a perfect 2-for-1. So I load a shell into Mr. 12 Gauge's chamber and something occurred. The moment the 2 dogs heard the rack, they both came to a stop, turned to face me, and then bolted off on their back legs. I instantly froze, and all of the Native American folklore I had growing up with, including ghost stories about skinwalkers, just flew through my head. Remember that I am a white man, and up until that point, all of these tales were simply boogeyman tales that the Native children used to scare us. They came to life for me that evening. I was staying with my cousins at my grandmother's house for a month. It was the month of August, and I was the oldest, at the age of 15, with my cousins ranging in age from 10 to 15. So a 10, 13, and 14-year-old were my roommates. We frequently stayed up late telling terrifying stories, but after a few weeks, we made the decision to build a campfire in the backyard. So when you go into my grandmother's house from the road, the neighbors aren't too far away, but the backyard is a dense forest with roads cutting through it. Only a portion of the basement was actually underground because each house is on a hill, but that won't matter till later in the story. So we are in a rather tiny area of open land on the east side of her yard. From there, it was impossible to see the yards next door, and my grandma owned property that stretched for at least 3/4 of a mile on either side of us. After sharing spooky stories and playing Truth or Dare, my cousin, who's 14, challenged the 13-year-old and I to take a 10-minute walk along the trails. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and my younger cousin was a little more apprehensive than I was, but I immediately said yes because I wasn't easily afraid and was pretty level headed. Because it wasn't completely dark yet, we could see well enough to avoid getting attacked, and we did not pack a flashlight. After about 5 minutes of wandering through the pathways, we decided to turn because we could hardly see the fire through the woods. A big dog-like creature stood in the middle of the path, crouched over and with its front hands an inch off the ground. The thing that sticks out in my memory the most about it is how freaking white its eyes were. It also had a humanoid dog shape with a dog's torso and hands and feet, but a human head. As it went away from us in the opposite direction toward a creek that flowed through the yard, I remember I was frozen with panic because it gave us a direct look. Eventually, my cousin and I yelled bloody effing murder, and my grandmother and other cousins rushed over to help. I don't recall a lot of this because I was so confused and unable to think clearly, but I did wake up in bed, so I guess I passed out and then was taken up to the house. As the room was on the side that was not underground, all the kids slept in the basement in a large room with sliding glass doors to the outside. My bed was next to the large glass window through which I could see my cousins playing in the street below. I skipped breakfast in order to join them outside. Well, the house is in Michigan, so it can be a little cool even in the middle of August. There was a faint breeze, so I threw on a jacket and ran to join them. They weren't playing as I got down there. Instead, they were rushing to get my grandma. Her dogs, both of them, were ripped apart and dead. We went to bed early that night, and after about 2 in the morning, I woke up after feeling something hit my head. On the opposite side of the room from me, all of my cousins were sitting on a double bed. 2 double beds and 1 bunk bed are in the room, with the double beds being for my cousin, who was 14, and myself. They were silent and fixated on me. The 13-year-old cousin turned his head in the direction of the window, and I became frozen. They all appeared terrified. A truly messed up looking face was pressed to the window, its gaping eyes staring down at me as I turned just a little to the side. I yelled so loud, it disappeared. After I informed my grandma what happened, she called the police, but they weren't able to find anything, of course. I left after that and have never returned there at night since. I came into contact with a skinwalker for the first and only time in July 2004, close to Gallup, New Mexico. Previously, I would have said, I'll believe it when I see it. I guess I now believe. I didn't see a full human or an animal. I was with my 10-year-old and we just finished packing and cleaning everything up. And as we headed outside, I noticed a figure go from behind my neighbor's car to a neighboring tree that stood between our apartments. There were no growling teeth, red glowing eyes, or foul scent. It did move swiftly, but not quickly enough to escape the porch lights and the light from a nearby light post. It did not approach me or give me a look. It moved in an effort to remain undetected. I was about 15 feet away from it, but it didn't thoroughly investigate it by turning around. The creature I saw resembled the beast from Beauty and the Beast and was similar to a wolf. It was a really enormous wolf with brown fur that totally covered it. Other than walking on its hind legs, it lacked any human characteristics. As we climbed into our car, it hid behind the tree. I asked my son, "Did you see that?" Thank goodness he hadn't, otherwise he would have never-ending nightmares. I can still recall what it looked like, so I'm aware they exist, and I still hope I never run across one again. A very close friend of mine experienced this. I've heard a lot about skinwalkers and coyotes, and I've even had a strange few encounters with coyotes. Well, the creepiest was waking up to see paw prints all around my sleeping bag without ever hearing them throughout the night. But I've never actually experienced anything supernatural. But Patrick's tale made me refrain from visiting my preferred wilderness hiding place. One morning when he was leaving the area after camping there for a few days, he mentioned that a coyote always seemed to be nearby, like in his peripheral view, but never visibly. As soon as he had his vehicle loaded, he began to move down the wash toward the fire route. He could see that coyote pursuing him at the end of the wash. It was running next to him as he drove onto the road. Now that he was scared, he sped up. It was running next to him as he was moving at about 35 miles an hour. Without a doubt, that's impossible. When Patrick turned around, he saw the coyote moving forward on two legs while sporting what he thought were buckskin pants. A split second later, it was a person covered in coyote fur running alongside his truck. It was gone when he turned to look again. After that, we did not return to the grove. I made the decision to travel to the reservation with my best friend Karen for a 3-day visit at her grandmother's house. Her grandmother lives close to a place in Arizona called Tuba City. Despite being in the middle of nowhere, rural homes do surround it. We attend the same university, and I was rather curious to learn about Navajo tradition. It was really laid back on the first day we were there, nothing out of the norm. But then her 67-year-old grandmother claimed that a stray dog appeared out of nowhere and refused to go away. It seemed to have behaved strangely, in my opinion. It had a black, shaggy coat like a cross between a Labrador and a German Shepherd. That evening, Grandma was in the kitchen preparing dinner as we watched a movie in the living room, which had large windows that looked out onto the front where the cars were parked, and a small bookshelf next to the windows where the DVDs were kept. We had just finished watching a DVD when Karen went to put it back, but was panicked because a stray black dog was peering at us through the window while perched on top of the woodbox outside. It's not something typical dogs do, in my opinion, or hers. Usually my dog, a house dog, will scratch the door to get entry. Res dogs are not considered house dogs, and keeping dogs inside of homes is frowned upon in Navajo culture. They're intended to safeguard the home and its owner. The other dogs appeared to avoid it. Karen yelled at it to get off the box as she flung open the door and it sprinted away from the shed. After buying some food in Tuba City, we returned to the house. Nothing odd about the absence of the dog. Karen and I were alone because Grandma had to go visit some people. We both looked outside when we heard someone trying to unlock the door around 5 o'clock because there had been no cars or dogs barking outside. Looking through the living room window to the door, I saw the dog pawing at the door in an attempt to open it. Standing on its hind legs, the creature had two paws clutching the brass doorknob. I believed that was weird, but we were not freaked out. Karen was frightened though. She flung open the door and chased it away. Grandma came back later and Karen told her, and Grandma did not like what she heard. We got ready for bed and slept in the extra bedroom because it had 2 beds. The single window's curtains were partially opened. Even after we shut out the lights, we could still hear noises coming from the roof. Scratching noises, panting, and pitter-pattering steps. Then it appeared as though it had leaped onto the enormous plastic water barrel. We initially thought we heard barking, but as it got louder, it became apparent that the other dogs were also barking at something. However, something started to run around the house barking suddenly, and it was not a dog. This barking sounded human. A deep male voice was barking as if it knew that we knew it was not a dog. We panicked as we heard him panting by the window again. The stray dog was once again standing on his hind legs, staring into our bedroom when Karen made the, in my opinion, stupid decision to open the curtains. The dog had 2 black holes in its neck, its eyes twinkled, so imagine those hideous glossy spider eyes staring at you, and his paws were deformed-looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. Again, Grandma heard the screams, saw it, and raced inside the door while also closing the curtains. She began by gathering ashes from the fireplace, loading 3 shells into the shotgun she had hidden under her bed, and giving herself a Navajo blessing before heading outside to shoot it, yelling in Navajo that the thing was not wanted there, and it should leave immediately so it can go linger somewhere else. Being traditional people, they both contacted a medicine man the following day to come over and put cedar in. He sanctified the location and prayed for everyone there using cedar smoke and an eagle feather. I got an arrowhead and they forced us to eat some kind of eagle's gull like bitter herbs. Apparently, I needed to carry one for protection and a little pouch called corn pollen. It seems to work pretty well. The medicine man said the dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. The body of the stray dog, which was killed by the skinwalker, made an illusion so we wouldn't know it was not a real dog. In addition, he claimed that Yoshis frequently hurt people by spitting at them with something resembling a human bone straw. Imagine spitballs, but only deadlier. Doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man that day pulled a piece of human bone straw out of Grandma's right shoulder. Pretty big, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick. It was real because we watched him pull it out of her.